Welcome one and all to our Applied Project Showcase video. We are Team A4 from the year. We represent CHI Franciscan Healthcare as their consultants. My name is Erica Warren, and I was the project manager this quarter, although we did rotate throughout the year. I am here with my two associates, Sugandha Gupta, who was our business analyst for the year, and Cassandra Weiner, who was our business strategist. For our CHI Franciscan team, we have Matt Mesker, Jessica Schlicker, Joshua Viggers, and Rushika Javari, who helped and assisted us throughout our year in completion of this project. For the presentation content overview, I will go over our scope and our 5 W's, so our who, what, where, when, whys for the project. Sugandha will discuss our data with a brief overview and how we clean and selected our data. And then we will go into our analytics, our descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive, which I will address in just a moment. And then we will introduce our interactive dashboard, which was our deliverable for our client. At last, we will talk about conclusions and recommendations for future work on this project. In terms of the scope, I have a couple definitions to go over with you before we go into what our scope was for the year. So we have boarding times, which is defined by the time that a patient was admitted into the emergency department to the point of discharge. And then we also have patient threshold data, which is whether a patient's border time status was considered normal, warning, or critical. So before I discuss our scope for the year, I'm going to define 2 important definitions in order to understand it. So the first is boarding times, which is patient boarding times. And this is calculated from the point of emergency department admittance to the point of discharge. And the second definition is patient threshold data. So this is the time and status of when a patient is considered in a normal, warning, or critical range, and this is associated with bed utilization and whether there's empty or open beds available. So taking those 2 definitions into account, our scope is that through our data analysis, we will discover historical trends that will aid in future decision-making of emergency department boarding times and patient thresholds, which will ultimately optimize the bed utilization for the governing body of CHI. So in order to discuss what our project was about and how we went about defining what analytical tools and techniques we wanted to use, we wanted to define the who, what, where, when, whys of our project. So for that, our who was the comparison of 8 hospitals in our target county, which was Pierce County. What is throughout all of the emergency departments at the hospitals. When is as soon as the stay of patients reached a designated threshold determined by CHI staff, and why in order to trend patient boarding time data per emergency department over a given period of time. And that given period of time is defined by the hour or the day. So I will briefly discuss our analytical techniques and steps that we used. So the first is descriptive, and descriptive analytics define what has happened in the past. That's important to understand in order to determine what tools to use moving forward in your analytics. The second is diagnostic. So why did something occur? The next is predictive. So based on what we've learned and understood, what will happen in the future given the same or a similar scenario. And lastly is predictive. So now that I know what has occurred, what do I do? So this is one of the more advanced and necessary analytic in terms of deciding decision support and decision automation in the future. And Cassandra is going to elaborate on this in a short while. Next, I'm going to pass the presentation along to Sugandha, who is going to introduce our data and our data techniques.
Thank you, Erica. Now I will show you a brief overview of the data. So the data of CHI Franciscan is stored in 8 different databases, and we are using one of them. So as you can see here in this Excel file, this data suggests the patient wait time. So here this column suggests the patient wait time when it starts and patient wait time when it ends. And these are the hospitals and these are the emergency department. And the columns having patient alias and patient ID, we have changed the IDs and the aliases so as to maintain and protect the identities of the patients. The next image suggests the threshold data. These are the cutoff timings for critical, normal, warning alerts. And as you can see, this is for each hospital. Further, I'll show you how we have done our data cleaning and selection. So for our project, we will be using 2 months of data, that is December 2019 and January 2020. And we are using only 2 months of data because we only have these 2 months of data that is complete. Further, each row of the data suggests each patient. So we have rolled up patient count by admission time, and later we have also rounded the admission times to the hour. Then lastly, we have removed the outliers. Our outliers consist of 11% of the total data, and later Cassandra will explain that how it has increased the accuracy of the model significantly. Further, I'll show you our descriptive analysis. This we have done using advanced functions of Microsoft Excel. Here we have created 2 scatter plots, which suggest the patient counts by weekday in this first graph and patient counts by hour in the second graph. And this is for all the hospitals. The purple line here suggests the trend. And as we can see, we have a basic trend here that suggests on Sunday or Saturday, that is on weekends, we have less traffic of patients. And here, as we can see, during morning hours, we have less traffic than the evening ones. Further, we narrowed our approach, and you can see that we have taken 2 hospitals, and again, we have plotted the patient counts on weekday basis. And again, we saw the similar trend. That is on weekends, we have less number of patients. And if we plot these 2 hospitals by hourly basis, then the morning times have less number of patients. Then further, we have performed diagnostic analysis. Here we have used Tableau, and this is the dashboard that we have created. And as you can see, I'll start from topmost right graph. This graph suggests the distribution of threshold data across all the hospitals. That is, it will suggest how many number of patients are there in normal cutoff times in this particular hospital, and how many patients are there in critical, and the red ones represent the warning. Then coming to our next graph, it suggests that ED department is divided into 2 sections. That is, one is EDL long stay, and the other one is ED hold. So ED hold constitutes of the patients who stay in the hospital on a regular time intervals, and they are represented by the red bars. And EDL, that is EDL long stay, represented by blue bars, are the ones where patients have to stay longer in the ED department because of the nature of the treatment. So that is why we can see here that EDL is mostly contained in the critical threshold data. And this should not be the case. So later Cassandra will explain that why it is impacting our model. Then coming to our graphs here on the left-hand side, we have plot the critical alert data on daily basis and on hourly basis. So as we can see here, it supports our descriptive analysis, 1 being our Saturday and 7 being our Sunday. Here we can see that weekends have less traffic. And here, if we can see on hourly basis, 5 a.m. has the least traffic. That is the least patient flow. Further predictive and prescriptive analysis will be explained by Cassandra, and I'll hand over the slides to Cassandra. Day of the week, 1 being our Saturday and 7 being our Sunday. We can now see that the results of our descriptive analysis were the same as our diagnostic one, and we can see the weekends have less traffic. And here, if we see for our hourly basis, 5 a.m. has the least traffic. Then going further, we have done our predictive analytics, and this will be explained by Cassandra.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassandra Weiner, and like Sugandha said, I'm going to begin talking with you today about our predictive analytics. So we used R, which is a free open source statistic program, and we created 3 different models to predict the future duration of patient boarding times, predicting how long are these patients going to be staying in the hospital. We used, you can see here, we have our classification theorem up here, and the 3 types are the naive Bayes, our random forest, and the SVM. Now here we have the overall for all hospitals, and you can see that we had about an 88.64% accuracy rate with estimating how long someone is going to stay in an emergency department. And it's a thing to note is that we removed outliers, and this increased our accuracy by about 10%. So this is something that is, you know, you're going to have people staying in the emergency department, single bed certs, you know, they can't find a psych ward or something. And so people are going to be staying there for longer than is normal. So we want to remove those outliers to get our accuracy. Also, as was mentioned previously, if you note, there are 2 hospitals who had about a 99% accuracy rate with the random forest model. And these 2 locations were significant because they had very few emergency department long-term stays. So when you add in the EDL, it makes it more difficult to predict how long someone is going to stay in the hospital, which makes sense because if you're in a long-term part of the emergency department, you're going to be staying there longer term. So next we go on from this and we build our prescriptive analytics. Now, this becomes more difficult because you have to incorporate additional data. So next we build onto that our prescriptive analytics. Now you saw this before with Erica describing the different types of analytics. And essentially what you do is you build on, you have your descriptive, which uses our basic data, you know, realizing that the bed stays were the shortest on the weekends, had fewer people on the weekends. Diagnostic, what was happening, predictive. Now, when you get to prescriptive, you want to do things like decision support and decision automation. And these require incorporating other types of data, such as the total number of beds per hospital, or the staffing levels at certain times at the different hospitals. And decisions you can then make with that information would be things like directing an ambulance to go to a different emergency department if you know that one of them currently has long wait times and they're full. But we did not have that additional data for our dashboard. However, we were able to realize that the critical and warning thresholds were not ideal. So in an ideal state, you want to have most of your patients having normal wait times or normal bed stay times. A few of them will be in the warning threshold, and you want the least amount of critical. Currently, you can see we do not have a very balanced wait stay. And if we were to adjust the thresholds based on the location and their metrics, this could help us have more prescriptive type of data solutions. So finally, we go on to our conclusions and our recommendations. So some high-level solutions for future application. The first and easiest one we feel would be to customize thresholds by location, and more importantly, to customize them between EDL and ED. Like we said, if you're going to stay long-term, you should have a longer time threshold before you reach the critical level than if you are just in the regular emergency department. Our second recommendation is to incorporate more specific bed capacity data as well as staffing data. This will allow you to really get those prescriptive analytics ideas and tools that you can use to increase capacity. And third, there's a need to continue to collect historical data in order to identify important trends. And three, you need to continue to collect historical data in order to identify important trends. Since the data we used for this project was collected by the GE tiles, they've only had about a few years. And like you noticed, we just used December and January because those were the only months that we had complete data. So this is something that will easily be rectified with time. Another idea we have is to have a data liaison, someone who can facilitate better understanding of the data, and this will allow for greater expediency and future initiatives. So, for example, you could have someone like Erica or Suganda who understands how the data works, where it's coming from, and how to relate different sets of data to each other, working with someone in the emergency department or in mission control who would then be able to give them insights regarding the medical aspects of it. And the last thing to note is that due to the current COVID-19 pandemic, we're going to have an impact to the data and the research findings. As everyone knows, these past few months have not quite been the norm regarding how emergency departments are taking patients and how long they are keeping them. So as you're collecting historical data, when you have incidents like this, you just need to be aware that it's going to change the trends for what is happening in the future. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.
Enjoy the rest of the showcase.